Within SolidWorks, there's two different kinds of settings: system options and document properties. And these can be accessed from the tools and options, or you can click on the options button at the top here, or this pull down. I'm not going to go through all the options because there's quite a few of them. New to 2012 in the General tab is the Feature Freeze. And if you turn this on, this allows you to freeze out features from rebuild when you're working on the subsequent features. And this can significantly help performance when working with a part or an assembly. Within the colors, you can control the colors of various shaded elements within SolidWorks and various edges. In the display selection, the only option I usually change is I change this Force Assembly Transparency to Opaque Assembly. And this is for when you're editing parts within an assembly. It'll turn the rest of the parts transparent, which in my opinion makes it a little bit more difficult to work with the assembly, and that's why I set this to opaque. Within the performance section, the first one is verification on rebuild, and this can be important if you work with very complex parts. Typically, SolidWorks will check adjacent faces against each other to make sure there's no overlap so that you have a fully enclosed body. If you turn this on, it'll check against non-adjacent faces in case there's any issues. Typically you'll want this turned off, but if you are having issues with more complex parts, you may want to turn this on to just check those bodies. If you have trouble rotating your parts or assemblies, if they're slow, you'll probably want to turn curvature generation very low or turn it off. Within the assemblies section, you can control how many parts before you go into large assembly mode. The file locations section is fairly important as it stores all the file locations for every single one of these elements. If you find yourself missing something that should be there, for example the design library, if that's missing from the design library section, and you'd want to add in the correct file location. Within the feature manager section, you can control what's shown in the tree. For example, by default you can see the materials shown, the default planes, the origin, sensors, and annotations. And I've shown equations because I tend to use them more frequently, and usually I'll also show solid bodies and surface bodies, as I'll typically be working with both surfaces and solid bodies. But if there are any items that you work with more frequently, for example mate reference or design table, you might want to show those. In the backup recover section, you can control your auto recover as well as backup, and this will be covered in a separate video. You can control your mouse settings with the touch. And at the bottom, when you get messages and errors within SolidWorks that you have the choice of ignoring, you can always come back in and allow those to be shown again. But once again, it's useful to go through and figure out what options that you like to work with and save those settings out. Within the document properties, we can control things that are specific to the document. We can control the drafting standard. A lot of these have to do with drawings, and we can control different items. For example, if I have an arc length that I have displayed, I can change the standard in which this is displayed. We can change the font as well as the font size. And the leader style and leader weight. And this applies to quite a few different items that you can go through and specify those values for. Within the detailing section, the display filter controls what you see out of the detail for each part. The units control what kind of units you're working with, and you can come in and customize these as well if you want. And within the image quality, you can turn this up for more detail, or you can turn this down if you're trying to save a bit of performance. And it's especially good to turn this down in assemblies so you're not working with too much detail and slowing down your rotation and work time. And we can control different flat pattern options from the sheet metal area. And in the sheet metal section, you can control different flat pattern options. And there's several options for different displays for the dimension expert. And once again, this is useful to go through and modify as you need, and then save out templates so that each one of your part, drawing, and assembly documents work with the standards that you're used to working with, or the settings that you want to be working with.